Seated in my small cell at the monastery, I watch the rising sun paint the sky with shades of orange and pink. At 75 years old, I feel a deep gratitude for each new day granted to me. My name is Brother Michael, and although I have spent much of my adult life as a monk, my journey here has been anything but conventional. I was born in a small Midwestern town, the son of hardworking parents who taught me the value of effort and perseverance. I grew up believing that success was measured by the amount of material goods one could accumulate. I followed that path for many years, building a successful career in the corporate world, marrying, having children, and living what many would call the American dream. However, as I approached 60, I felt a growing emptiness. Despite all the material achievements, something was missing. It was during this time that I had my first encounter with meditation, introduced by a co-worker who practiced mindfulness. Initially, I was skeptical, but I decided to give it a chance. I vividly remember the first time I sat down to meditate. It was challenging to remain still for just 5 minutes, but something in that experience touched me deeply. I began to practice daily, and gradually I noticed subtle changes in my life. I was calmer, more focused, and surprisingly, more productive at work. As I deepened my practice, I began to question many of the assumptions I had about life and success. I realized I had spent decades pursuing goals that didn't bring me true satisfaction. It was a moment of awakening, painful, but necessary. At 65, I made a decision that shocked my family and friends. I decided to retire early and join a Buddhist monastery. It wasn't an easy decision. My wife, although understanding, decided not to accompany me on this journey. My children, already adults, were confused by my choice, but something inside me knew it was the right path to follow. The first few months at the monastery were challenging. Accustomed to the comfort and fast pace of corporate life, I had to adapt to a simple and disciplined routine, waking up before dawn, meditating for hours, performing manual tasks, and studying Buddhist teachings. All of this tested my determination. However, as time passed, I began to experience a peace and clarity I had never known before. I realized that aging, far from being a decline, could be a journey of continuous growth and discovery. It was then that I began to reflect on the qualities that make the elderly true, rare gems. The first quality I identified was the wisdom accumulated over the years. Each wrinkle on our face tells a story. Each experience lived has taught us something valuable. This wisdom, when shared with compassion, can illuminate the path for younger generations. I remember an afternoon when I was meditating in the monastery garden. A young novice approached, visibly troubled. He told me about his doubts and fears regarding the path he had chosen. Instead of offering immediate advice, I shared with him my own journey of doubts and discoveries. I talked about how even at 70, I was still learning and growing. I saw his eyes light up with understanding and hope. This experience made me realize the power of personal narrative. We, the elderly, have the privilege of having lived many lives in one. Each phase has brought us unique lessons, and sharing these stories can be a source of inspiration and guidance for the younger ones. The second quality I identified was resilience. Throughout our lives, we face countless challenges and obstacles. Each time we get up after a fall, we become stronger. This ability to adapt and overcome adversities is one of the greatest strengths we develop with age. I recall a particularly challenging moment in my journey at the monastery. About a year after my arrival, I suffered a fall that resulted in a hip fracture. The recovery was slow and painful. There were moments when I thought about giving up, about going back to my comfortable life before. It was during this period that I met Brother John, an 85-year-old monk who had overcome a stroke a few years earlier. He visited me daily, sharing stories of his own recovery and encouraging me to persist. Each day is a new opportunity to grow, he would say, even when our bodies seem to betray us. Inspired by his resilience, I dedicated myself to my recovery with renewed determination. I learned to adapt my meditation practice, focusing on body awareness and healing. Gradually, I regained my mobility, and in the process discovered an inner strength I didn't know I possessed. This experience taught me a valuable lesson about the third quality that makes the elderly rare gems: the capacity for adaptation. As we age, our bodies and circumstances change, but our ability to adapt and find new ways to live a fulfilling life remains. I began to observe how the older monks in the monastery demonstrated this adaptability in their daily lives. Some, with reduced vision, developed a keen auditory perception. Others, with limited mobility, found creative ways to contribute to the community, whether through counseling or practicing contemplative arts. Inspired by these observations, I decided to initiate a program at the monastery focused on the well-being of older monks. We introduced adapted yoga practices, guided meditation sessions focused on accepting bodily changes, and workshops on proper nutrition for seniors. The impact of these initiatives was profound. I saw monks who previously felt limited by their age rediscover a sense of purpose and vitality. I realized that aging, when approached with mindfulness and acceptance, can be a phase of great spiritual and personal growth. It was in this context that I began to develop the 9 practices for aging with quality and purpose. The first one, which I've already mentioned, is cultivating wisdom and sharing it. The second is developing emotional and physical resilience, and the third is embracing adaptability. The fourth practice I identified was maintaining mental agility. At the monastery, I observed how older monks who kept themselves intellectually active, studying texts, learning new languages, or practicing arts like calligraphy, seemed younger in spirit and more engaged with life. I remember a day when I was helping in the monastery library. I found Brother Anthony, 78, absorbed in a book on quantum physics. Intrigued, I asked him about his interest. His eyes sparkled as he explained how the principles of quantum physics aligned with many Buddhist teachings about the nature of reality. "It's never too late to learn," he told me with a smile. "Each new piece of knowledge is like a window opening in our mind, letting in fresh air and new perspectives." Inspired by his attitude, I began to incorporate continuous learning into my daily routine. In addition to Buddhist studies, I started dedicating myself to learning a new language and exploring topics that had always interested me, but I never had time to study, such as astronomy and Western philosophy. I realized that keeping the mind active not only improved my memory and concentration, but also gave me a renewed sense of purpose and enthusiasm for life. Each new learning was an adventure, a way to expand my horizons and connect with the world in new and exciting ways. The fifth practice I identified was the importance of maintaining physical independence. At the monastery, even with our simple routines, there were always tasks that required a certain level of physical effort, from sweeping the courtyards to tending the garden. I observed how monks who kept themselves physically active, regardless of their age, seemed happier and more self-sufficient. I then decided to incorporate regular exercises into my routine, adapting them to my abilities and limitations. I started with meditative walks through the beautiful monastery gardens, gradually increasing the distance and pace. I also joined a Tai Chi group, a practice that perfectly combines physical movement with mindfulness. Over time, I noticed a significant improvement in my energy, balance, and flexibility. Tasks that once seemed challenging became easier. More importantly, I felt more confident and independent in my daily life. The sixth practice I found to be crucial was taking care of finances. Although we led a simple life at the monastery, with few material needs, I understood the importance of having financial security, especially for those living in the secular world. I reflected on my own financial journey, the mistakes I made, the lessons I learned. I realized that many people reach old age without adequate financial planning, which can be a source of great stress and limitation. I began offering basic financial counseling to monastery visitors seeking guidance. I emphasized the importance of living within one's means, saving for the future, and making financial choices aligned with one's values and life goals. Money is like water, I used to say. When it flows freely, it nourishes our life. When it stagnates, it becomes stale. And when it runs uncontrollably, it causes erosion. The secret is to find balance. The seventh practice I identified was cultivating hobbies and interests. At the monastery, in addition to our spiritual practices, we were encouraged to develop skills that brought joy and personal satisfaction. I discovered a passion for gardening. Taking care of plants, observing their growth, and harvesting the fruits of my labor brought a deep sense of fulfillment. Moreover, it was a wonderful way to practice mindfulness, being fully present in the moment, connected with nature. Other monks had their own interests, Some practiced painting, others devoted themselves to music or writing. I observed how these hobbies not only provided pleasure, but also served as a source of purpose and creative expression. The eighth practice I recognized as fundamental was maintaining an open and curious mind. As we age, it's easy to fall into the trap of becoming rigid in our opinions and habits. However, the most inspiring monks I met were those who maintained a learner's attitude, always open to new ideas and experiences. I remember a conversation I had with Brother Frank, an 82-year-old monk. He told me about how, at 75, he decided to learn how to use a computer and navigate the internet. At first, it was scary and frustrating, he admitted, but each new piece of knowledge I acquired made me feel more connected to the world and to younger generations. Inspired by his attitude, I began to challenge my own preconceptions and actively seek new experiences. I participated in silent retreats, experimented with new forms of meditation, and even ventured into discussions on topics I previously considered outside my interest, such as technology and contemporary art. I discovered that keeping an open mind not only enriched my life, but also helped me better connect with people of all ages. It was a way to remain relevant and engaged with the constantly changing world around me. The ninth and final practice I identified was perhaps the most important of all: cultivating strong family and social ties. At the monastery, although we lived a life of contemplation, we were a community. We supported each other, shared our joys and sorrows, and grew together. I reflected on my own family, my wife, my children and grandchildren. Although my choice of monastic life had initially created a distance over time, I found ways to maintain and even strengthen these bonds. I began writing regular letters to my family, sharing my reflections and experiences. I invited them to visit the monastery, offering them a glimpse into my new world. Over time, these visits became precious moments of reconnection and mutual understanding. I also cultivated new friendships at the monastery and with visitors from all parts of the world. Each new connection was an opportunity for growth, a chance to see the world through other eyes. I realized that as we age, these connections become even more vital. They anchor us, give us a sense of belonging and purpose. They are a constant reminder that no matter our age, we still have much to offer and receive in terms of love, understanding, and companionship. As I reflected on these 9 practices, I began to see aging in a new light. Far from being a decline, it was an opportunity for continuous growth, refinement of the spirit, and sharing of wisdom. As the years passed at the monastery, I realized that my journey of self-discovery and growth was far from over. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and opportunities to deepen my understanding of aging with grace and purpose. One morning, while walking through the monastery gardens, I encountered a group of elderly visitors. They were members of a local community center who had come for a guided tour. As I chatted with them, I was impressed by their life stories, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. It was at that moment that I had an epiphany. The 9 practices I had identified shouldn't be confined to the monastery walls. They could benefit elderly people everywhere, helping them rediscover their value and purpose in life. With the abbot's blessing, I began organizing weekly workshops open to the community. In these meetings, I shared the practices I had developed, always emphasizing that each person should adapt them to their own reality and circumstances. The first session was about cultivating wisdom and sharing it. I encouraged participants to reflect on their life experiences and identify the most valuable lessons they had learned. Then, we discussed ways to share this wisdom with younger generations. A lady named Mrs. Davis, 78, shared how she had started recording short videos for her grandchildren, telling stories from her youth and the lessons she had learned. At first, I felt foolish talking to the camera, she admitted with a smile. But when I saw the genuine interest in my grandchildren's eyes as they watched the videos, I realized I was leaving a valuable legacy. Her story inspired others in the group to find creative ways to share their wisdom. Some decided to write memoirs, others volunteered as mentors in community programs. I saw how the simple act of recognizing the value of their experiences brought a new light to the eyes of those elderly people. In the next session, we focused on emotional and physical resilience. I shared my own experience of recovery after the hip fracture and how it taught me about the importance of persistence and adaptation. I invited a physical therapist to talk about exercises adapted for seniors and the importance of staying active. We also discussed mindfulness techniques for dealing with the stress and anxiety that often accompany aging. One of the participants, Mr. Johnson, 82, shared how he had overcome depression after losing his wife. "I thought my life was over," he said with a choked voice. "But through therapy and meditation, I learned to find purpose again. Now I volunteer at an animal shelter. Taking care of these defenseless beings has given me a new reason to live." His story moved everyone and perfectly illustrated how resilience can help us overcome even the most painful losses. As we progressed through the practices, I saw remarkable transformations in the participants. People who previously felt invisible or without purpose began to see themselves as rare gems, recognizing the unique value they brought to the world. In the session on maintaining mental agility, we organized study groups where participants could explore new topics of interest. I saw friendships form as people discussed literature, philosophy, science, and art. The enthusiasm was contagious. One participant, Mrs. Anderson, 75, decided to learn computer programming. "My grandchildren always talk about technology, and I wanted to understand what it was all about," she explained. "Now, not only do I understand, but I'm developing an app to help seniors connect with volunteers in their community." Her initiative reminded me of the importance of never underestimating our capacity to learn and grow, no matter our age. When we reached the session on physical independence, I invited Tai Chi and yoga instructors to demonstrate exercises adapted for seniors. We saw participants who could barely get up from a chair at the beginning of the program now moving with more confidence and balance. Mr. Thompson, 80, shared how he had regained his independence after a stroke. "I started with small exercises in bed," he explained. "Gradually, I progressed to short walks. Today, I cook my own food, take care of my house, and even started driving again." Each step towards independence is a victory. His determination inspired many in the group not to give up, even in the face of significant health challenges. In the session on finances, we brought in a financial advisor specializing in retirement planning. We discussed the importance of living within our means, budgeting and planning for the future. Mrs. Clark, 72, shared how she had transformed her financial situation. "After my husband passed away, I realized I knew nothing about our finances," she admitted. "But instead of panicking, I decided to learn. I took online courses, read books, and sought advice. Today, not only do I manage my money with confidence, but I also help other widows do the same." Her story highlighted how it's never too late to take control of our finances and how this knowledge can be empowering. If you're enjoying these insights, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you. And now back to the story. As we moved on to the discussion about hobbies and interests, I saw how the participants' eyes lit up. Many had abandoned old passions due to the pressures of adult life and now saw retirement as an opportunity to rediscover them. We organized a hobby fair where participants could try different activities, from painting and ceramics to gardening and photography. It was inspiring to see people in their 70s and 80s approaching these new experiences with the enthusiasm of children. Mr. Wilson, 85, discovered a talent for creative writing. "I've always loved reading, but I never thought I could write my own stories," he shared. "Now I'm working on my first novel. It's exciting to think that I can leave a literary legacy for my great-grandchildren." His story reminded me that creativity has no age and that it's never too late to explore new talents. In the session on keeping an open mind, we challenged participants to try something completely outside their comfort zone. Some tried meditation for the first time. Others ventured into dance classes or experimented with cuisines from different cultures. Mrs. Martinez, 79, decided to learn about social media. "At first, I thought it was just for young people," she laughed. "But now I use Facebook to reconnect with old friends and Instagram to share my paintings. It's a wonderful way to feel connected to the world." Her openness to new experiences inspired others to step out of their comfort zones and embrace the changes of the modern world. Finally, we reached the session on cultivating strong family and social ties. This was perhaps the most emotional of all. Many participants expressed feelings of loneliness and isolation, especially those who had lost spouses or whose children lived far away. We discussed strategies for strengthening existing connections and creating new ones. We encouraged participants to get involved in community activities, use technology to stay in touch with distant loved ones, and cultivate new friendships. Mr. Harris, 88, shared how he had overcome isolation after his wife's death. "I started attending a local community center," he explained. "There, I found people with similar interests. We formed a chess club and now meet 3 times a week. These friendships have given new meaning to my life." His story highlighted the importance of actively seeking social connections, no matter our age. As the program progressed, I saw notable changes in the participants. People who previously seemed discouraged and directionless now exhibited a new energy and purpose. They began to see themselves not as a burden to society, but as valuable contributors with much still to offer. One day, after a particularly impactful session, a participant named Mrs. Thompson approached me. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Brother Michael, when I first came here, I felt invisible and worthless. Now I see that I am a rare gem, unique and precious. Thank you for helping me rediscover my shine." Her words touched me deeply and reinforced my conviction that this was a vital mission. I realized that I was not only helping these seniors age with quality and purpose, but also contributing to changing society's perception of aging. Inspired by this experience, I decided to expand the program. With the help of other monks and community volunteers, we began offering workshops in community centers, nursing homes, and even online, reaching seniors who couldn't leave their homes. The impact was beyond my most optimistic expectations. We received letters and emails from people all over the country, sharing how the 9 practices had transformed their lives. Families wrote to us thanking us for the change they saw in their elderly relatives, more engaged, happy, and full of life. One day I received an invitation to give a talk at a national conference on aging. Initially I was apprehensive. After all, I was a monk accustomed to the quietness of the monastery. But I realized this was an opportunity to bring our message to an even larger audience. On the day of the conference, I looked at the audience full of health professionals, caregivers, and seniors. I took a deep breath and began to share our journey. I talked about the 9 practices, illustrating each one with stories from our workshop participants. At the end of the talk, I was surprised by a standing ovation. People came to me with tears in their eyes, thanking me and sharing their own stories. I realized we had touched on something deep and universal, the desire to age with dignity, purpose, and joy. In the months that followed, our approach began to gain national attention. We were invited to television programs, radio interviews, and even to contribute to a book about healthy aging. Although the attention was gratifying, what touched me most were the individual stories of transformation, like that of Mr. Jenkins, 92, who decided to go back to school to complete his high school education, or Mrs. Foster, 85, who started a storytelling program in children's hospitals, bringing joy to sick children. Each story was a testimony to the transformative power of seeing aging not as a burden, but as an opportunity for continuous growth and meaningful contribution to the world. As our initiative grew, I began to reflect on the broader impact we were having. We weren't just helping individuals, we were contributing to changing the social narrative about aging. In a society that often values youth above all else, we were showing that advanced age brings with it unique and valuable gifts. We were challenging stereotypes and showing that the elderly can be active, engaged, and vital contributors to their communities. One day, while meditating in my cell, I had a clear vision of the future we were helping to create, a future where aging is celebrated, where the wisdom of the elderly is valued, and where each person, regardless of age, is seen as a rare gem, unique and precious. This vision filled me with renewed energy and an even deeper commitment to our mission. I realized that the work we had initiated had the potential to impact future generations, creating a more inclusive and compassionate society for people of all ages. As I reflected on all we had accomplished and the path we still had ahead, I felt a deep gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that brought me here, for the incredible people I had met along the way, and for the opportunity to make a significant difference in the world. Looking to the future, I saw that our journey was far from over. There was still much work to be done, many lives to be touched, many rare gems to be discovered and celebrated. With that thought, I rose from my meditation, ready to face the challenges and embrace the opportunities that the new day would bring. For each day, as I had learned and was helping others discover, was a new chance to grow, learn, and shine. As the years passed, our program continued to grow and evolve. What started as a series of workshops at the monastery had transformed into a national movement, inspiring people of all ages to rethink aging. One day, I received an unexpected call. It was from a television producer who wanted to make a documentary about our work. Initially, I hesitated. As a monk, I had always preferred a life of quietude and contemplation. However, after reflecting on the potential positive impact such exposure could have, I decided to accept the invitation. The film crew spent several weeks with us, documenting our sessions, interviewing participants, and capturing the essence of our approach to purposeful aging. It was a surreal experience to see our simple philosophy translated into the language of modern media. The documentary, titled Rare Gems: The Wisdom of Age, aired in prime time and had an immediate impact. We were flooded with messages from people across the country, sharing how the program had touched their lives and inspired changes. One of these messages came from Mrs. Sullivan, a 93-year-old lady. She wrote, "I watched your documentary and cried. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. You reminded me that I still have much to offer the world. Today, I started writing my memoirs for my great-grandchildren. Thank you for giving me back my purpose." Stories like Mrs. Sullivan's reaffirmed the importance of our work and inspired us to expand our reach even further. We began training facilitators across the country to conduct workshops based on our 9 practices. One of these practices that gained even more relevance was maintaining mental agility. In partnership with local universities, we developed a University of the Third Age program, where seniors could participate in classes and lectures on a variety of topics. I saw with joy how these courses became not just a source of knowledge, but also a social meeting point. Friendships blossomed, late romances bloomed, and a new community of enthusiastic learners formed. Mr. Peterson, a 78-year-old retiree, shared his experience. "I never thought at 78 I'd be discussing quantum physics and existential philosophy with people my age. These classes have reignited my passion for learning and made me realize that intellectual growth has no expiration date." Another practice that gained prominence was cultivating hobbies and interests. We organized a series of Third Age talent fairs in various cities. These events became a vibrant celebration of seniors' creativity and skills. I saw painters discovered at 80 having their works exhibited in galleries, writers debuting their first books at 90, and musicians forming bands and performing at festivals. It was living proof that creative expression knows no age limits. Mrs. O'Brien, an 85-year-old participant, surprised everyone with her wood sculptures. "I always wanted to try sculpting, but I thought my shaky hands wouldn't allow it," she shared. "But when I started, I discovered that my tremors gave a unique character to my pieces. What I saw as a limitation became my artistic signature." The practice of maintaining physical independence also continued to be a crucial part of our program. We expanded our partnerships with health professionals and rehabilitation centers to offer adapted exercise programs and alternative therapies. I watched with admiration as participants overcame physical limitations they previously considered insurmountable. Mr. Collins, 89, who had suffered a stroke, shared his journey. "When I started physical therapy, I could barely lift my arm. Today, not only have I recovered most of my movements, but I also practice Tai Chi 3 times a week. Every small progress is a victory I celebrate." As our work gained recognition, we began to be invited to participate in policy discussions about the aging population. We found ourselves advocating for policies that promoted active and inclusive aging, from improvements in urban accessibility to employment programs for seniors. One day, I was invited to speak in Congress about the importance of a holistic approach to aging. I looked at the faces of the legislators and shared stories of transformation we had witnessed. I spoke about how investing in the well-being of the elderly was not only morally right, but also economically sensible, reducing health costs and leveraging the valuable experience of this population. To my surprise and joy, our recommendations were well received. In the months that followed, We saw the implementation of several initiatives inspired by our work, from intergenerational mentoring programs to incentives for companies that hired older workers. The practice of cultivating strong family and social ties continued to be a fundamental pillar of our approach. We initiated a program called Bridges of Wisdom, which connected seniors with young people for the exchange of experiences and skills. I saw grandparents teaching grandchildren to cook traditional recipes, while young people helped the elderly navigate the digital world. These exchanges not only strengthened family ties, but also helped break stereotypes and prejudices between generations. Mrs. Rodriguez, 82, shared how the program had transformed her relationship with her teenage granddaughter. Before, we barely spoke. She was always on her phone and I felt excluded. Now we spend hours together. She taught me how to use Instagram and I taught her how to knit. We discovered we have much more in common than we imagined. As our initiative grew, I began to reflect on the long-term sustainability of our work. I realized it was time to think about succession and how to ensure our mission would continue beyond me. I began to identify and train leaders within our community, people who embodied the principles of the 9 practices and had the passion to carry them forward. It was a process of letting go, of trusting that the seeds we had planted would continue to flourish even without my direct presence. One of these leaders was Mrs. Carter, a former participant in our program who had become one of our most dedicated facilitators. At 75, she exuded contagious energy and enthusiasm. "Brother Michael," she told me one day, "when I came to your first workshop, I was lost and without purpose. Today, I feel I've found my calling. Helping other seniors rediscover their value is what makes me get out of bed every morning with a smile on my face." Her words filled me with a deep sense of fulfillment. I realized that the true success of our work was not just in the changes we had promoted, but in creating a community of people committed to carrying this message forward. As I prepared to take a step back and assume a more advisory role, I reflected on the incredible journey it had been. From that first moment of epiphany in the monastery garden to the national movement we had created, each step had been a lesson in humility and inspiration. I saw how the 9 practices we had identified, cultivating wisdom, developing resilience, embracing adaptability, maintaining mental agility, preserving physical independence, taking care of finances, cultivating hobbies, keeping an open mind, and strengthening social ties, had become a roadmap for a full and meaningful life in old age. More importantly, I saw how these practices had helped countless people reconnect with their intrinsic value, to truly see themselves as rare gems, unique, precious, and with much to offer the world. On a quiet afternoon, I sat down to meditate in the same garden where it all began. I reflected on the path traveled and the future unfolding before us. I felt a deep gratitude for having been an instrument in this journey of transformation. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, I smiled, thinking of all the lives we had touched and all those that would still be impacted by our work. I realized that just as the sunset is not an end, but a prelude to a new dawn, aging is not a decline, but an opportunity for a new beginning. With that thought, I stood up, ready to embrace the next chapter of our collective journey. For I knew that as long as there are people willing to see the beauty and value in each phase of life, there will always be new, rare gems to be discovered, celebrated, and shared with the world. And so, dear readers, I conclude this story not with an end, but with an invitation. An invitation for you to also embark on this journey of self-discovery and purpose. To see in yourselves and in others around you the rare gems that you truly are. Always remember, age does not diminish our value, it refines it. Each wrinkle is a story, each year a lesson, and each day a new opportunity to shine.